Hello all my Kenvians and welcome to a new episode of Discovering Steven Universe. I have my glasses off right now so I can address you all without the reflection of my screen being in my eyes because it's rather annoying. At least when I can see myself on the screen here. It's a little bit strange that you can't really see my eyes because of the computer screen. But regardless, today I'm going to be watching The Answer. And curious to see what the answer is. And also what the question might be. Is it the answer to all of our questions? Unlikely because it's a very short episode, as are they all. But I'm ready to get into it, and let's start watching The Answer.
Steven!
Oh,
Garnet!
scared the crap out of me.
It's midnight. Happy birthday, Steven!
Oh man, are you finally gonna tell me that you're a fusion of the gems Ruby and Sapphire like you promised?
You already know about all that, Steven.
True.
But what you don't know is this colony will not be completed.
Oh, that's Rose.
Who are you? Say yourself!
We are the Crystal Gems.
Rose and Pearl.
Right on schedule.
Oh, so they just form a giant ruby.
No!
That's how they first fused. Interesting.
Thank you.
What kind?
The Garnet song.
No more questions. Don't ever question this. You already are the answer.
The Answer.
So, what was it? The answer. Wow, I knew it.
So did I.
Okay. So, well, yeah, I mean, we still got the, I guess as long as they're at the barn, we'll have the outro with the crickets, so no music per se. But wow, that was a really interesting episode. It was one I wasn't expecting for sure, but one that I'm glad we got, without a doubt. Let's get into my favorite parts of this episode, starting with this vision, this vision of Homeworld. Like, well, actually, now that I think about it, it wasn't really Homeworld. It was like a floating ship or a floating platform of sorts. So what I wrote down was sort of a vision of Homeworld, but that's not accurate. It was being surrounded by all these Homeworld gems, or at least these silhouettes, for the most part, of all these Homeworld gems. And so yeah, I found that really interesting that we got to see kind of into this world of the gems, which touches on a few other of my favorite parts. The first of which is that we got to see what I believe to be another pearl, based on what Peridot had been describing before, and also the very pointy nose, the bird-like features that our own pearl has. And I guess since Sapphire was addressing Blue Diamond, that would be Blue Pearl, I guess. I don't know if that's the right way to put it or not, but yeah, that's just seeing another pearl like that I found really interesting. My next favorite part was getting to see these other rubies. Seeing, well, I guess the other two counterparts to Ruby's trio, or original trio. And of that, what I really found interesting was how they fused. It's like, unlike the fusions that we've been used to, where the crystal gems come together and then they form a different entity altogether, when the 3 rubies fused together, they became one giant ruby. And, well, of course, when 2 different gems fused, that's when there was that big issue and Ruby was going to be broken or shattered. So, I mean, clearly the idea of or different gems fusing together in the homeworld is very, very taboo. So that was really interesting to see, especially if, I can only assume that if multiple sapphires fused together, they would form one big sapphire, or if multiple diamonds maybe even fused together, they seem to be rather large to begin, well, based on how tall Blue Diamond seemed, just based on what I actually did get to see. She seems rather tall, so I can only assume that if more than one diamond fused together, it would be even bigger, so to speak. But moving on from there, my next favorite part about this episode, having to do with fusions again, was the first fusion of Garnet. And they formed this very much unlike any form of Garnet we've seen before. It was like very young, very innocent, and the colors weren't fully merged. It's like they were still somewhat separate. She looked like cotton candy, basically, like a cotton candy Garnet, and that was just freaking adorable, and I loved it. My next favorite part of the episode was the fight. When Rose and Pearl appeared. Rose was awesome. Pearl was just, maybe a lot of it has to do with the fact that she's alongside Rose, but she was just awesome, just total badass. So I absolutely love that aspect. And yeah, I'm sure there are other favorites I can come up with, but yeah, that's all the ones that I listed, at least. As far as annoyances go, I didn't write any down, but I do wish that we had gotten to hear the voice of this Blue Diamond. Now, I understand why, because it's all being told from the perspective of Garnet, and the only other voices, aside from Rose and Pearl, that we heard in this story were of Ruby and Sapphire. So it makes sense that Garnet would be voicing any other characters, such as when, like, the Silhouette spoke and, yelled at them. It's like it was in Garnet's voice. So I get that, but I do wish that we had gotten at least a little bit of the Blue Diamond's voice. Or maybe even if the Blue Pearl had spoken. I don't know. I do wish that happened. It's like very, very tiny annoyance, but it is there, at least. And then, I know this doesn't really count as a moment of terror, but when Garnet woke Steven up, just out of nowhere, that scared me, honestly. That was just a very, moment. So, if this episode has a moment of terror at all, it would be that. So, as for tracks of the episode, the one that stands out the most by far absolutely has to be the Ruby and Sapphire song, where they're essentially exploring their feelings for each other, they're getting to know each other and trying to survive in this place that they just don't really know very well. And then at the end, it starts to come together into Garnet's song. I have no idea if that humming will actually show up, I apologize. But for a quote of the episode, there were some very good lines. And what would usually be the quote of the episode would probably be either when Rose said, "You are the answer," Or when Steven asks, what the answer was, and Garnet says love. Like, typically that would be my quote of the episode. But the one that stood out the most to me, and it really plays in more to this mindset of how things are on Homeworld, how they are for all these other gems back on Homeworld. And it's when Ruby says, "There's tons of me." When Sapphire is showing concern for Ruby, it's like all Ruby cares about is Sapphire and keeping her safe, and she doesn't care. She's like, "There's tons of me." So, from that perspective, it's like Ruby sees herself, or at least saw herself at that point, as just a disposable soldier. Like, she knew and accepted that potential fate of hers. So just that simple line, "There's tons of me," it really hit me, to be honest. So again, I know that may not be the quote that a lot of you all were looking for, most likely, the actual answer, the answer. But yeah, it just really worked for me, in my opinion. So yeah, as for a question of the episode, I don't really have one. Maybe the question will be, will we get to see more of Garnet's early days when she was still in that kind of cotton candy-ish form? Like, will we get more flashbacks to that time period? Because I would like to get to see Garnet, coming into her own. I think that would be a really interesting point in time to see in the show. As for a theory, I don't really have much of one, but my theory is going to be that the next episode is going to focus on Steven's birthday. And I bet you can't guess why that's my theory. Because it's the next episode's name. Steven's birthday. But regardless, before I finish this up, my overall thoughts on the episode, I thought it was quite excellent. I hope there are more like it to come. Again, I hope we get to see more of Garnet's early days. I get to see more of Pearl back then when she was fighting right alongside Rose. Maybe Garnet's first battle. That would be really interesting to see. So, but yeah, overall, love this episode, and I'm ready to check out the next one for sure. And the next episode will be Steven's birthday. So I'm curious whether or not this will be another, fun, happy-go-lucky episode, or if it might be a little bit misleading, and on Steven's birthday, things kind of go to crap. Because maybe the cluster, or maybe Homeworld gems, who knows? But I'm definitely interested to see what happens next. So, as always, everyone, please let me know your thoughts on my favorites, annoyances, tracks, so on and so forth. And let me know some of your thoughts on this episode as well. I'm really looking forward to hearing what you have to say. And until next time, everyone, for Steven's birthday, I'm Papa Kenn, and I will see you in the next episode.